Bonjour, Wachenin. Welcome to Lakehead University's Treaties Recognition Week. Panel discussion, Robinson Huron Treaty 1850 Annuities case. We are happy that you are able to join us. Denise Baxter, Makwadodam, Martin Falls, and Donjaba. My name is Denise Baxter, Vice Provost, Indigenous Initiatives at Lakehead University, and I will be your MC for the event today. Lakehead University respectfully acknowledges its campuses are located on the traditional lands of Fort William First Nation, signature to the Robinson-Spear Treaty of 1850, and the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy in the area of the Williams Treaty. In Lakehead's commitment to social justice and social responsibility, we advance the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action and the Universities Canada Principles on Indigenous Education. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendation to build capacity for intercultural understanding, empathy, and mutual respect has become a guiding principle for the commitments Lakehead has made in both Northwestern Ontario and Simcoe County, and will continue to guide our efforts in the future. Before we begin, I would like to share an important notice of video recording of the Treaties Recognition Week event. Participants are reminded that this online event is being recorded, and we are doing this to preserve a record in the university's archives and to publicize and promote Lakehead University. By attending, you are agreeing to be including in the recording and its public dissemination in any media now known or later developed anywhere in the world in perpetuity. We anticipate we'll have this recording up at lakeheadu.ca/indigenous on our YouTube channel by the end of the week, so you can come back to it again. It is now my pleasure to introduce the panel moderator for today's session. Professor Tennille Brown is an assistant professor at the Boralaskan Faculty of Law at Lakehead University, where she teaches in the areas of property law, wills and estates, and Aboriginal legal issues. Her research examines the intersection between land, property, and geography with a focus on human rights. Professor Brown is a member of the Human Rights Research and Education Center and a member of the Center for Law, Technology, and Society, housed both at the University of Ottawa. Professor Brown is a barrister and solicitor at the Bar of Ontario. And prior to her academic work, Tennille worked in the Kingdom of Eswatini, formerly known as the Kingdom of Swaziland, as a legal officer in a national feminist rights organization. She publishes in the area of property law, Aboriginal law, and technology, and her recent publication reflects on these in the context of Etstawani. See Tennille Brown, Locating the Woman, a note on customary law and the utility of real property in the Kingdom of Eswatini, published in Angela Cameron, Sari Gabrin, and Val Napoleon, Creating Indigenous Property, Power, Rights, and Relationships, with the University of Toronto Press. This was just a recent publication last year in 2020. I'd like to welcome Tennille Brown, and it is really our pleasure to have you join us today, and I look forward to listening to the panel as it's moderated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise. That was wonderful. I am thrilled to be here. The discussion today is going to be led by three incredibly knowledgeable people involved in the Restore litigation, which is so important to our work here at Lakehead and to the lands that we are situated on. So I'm going to introduce our three panelists. We had their bios just a moment ago on the slideshow, and there's so much information there. So let me get going. Firstly, we have Chief Dean Sayers. Dean Sayers has been Chief of Batchewana since 2005, and he's now serving his eighth two-year term. During this time, the Batchewana First Nation has seen astronomical growth. Chief Dean Sayers grew up in Batchewana Village, a small community approximately 50 miles north of Sault Ste. Marie, where he worked with his father and brother in the First Nations commercial fishing industry. This experience provided education on the traditional understandings of the history of Batchewana, its affiliation with Lake Superior, and the reserved jurisdiction of the area. Chief Sayers moved on in pursuit of higher education and work experience, spending 13 years in Southern Ontario in various human service roles with First Nations peoples. He then returned home to take on various leadership roles, including the role as chief. It is through a culmination of experiences and understanding of Batchewanna's history, which led Chief Sayers and various councils to the formulation of the community's letter of assertion, a document outlining Batchewanna's expected relationship with resource developers in the original lands set aside for Batchewanna's sole benefit and use as part of the Robertson-Huron Treaty of 1850. This assertion has been instrumental to maintaining the First Nations sovereignty, jurisdiction, and contributes immensely to Batchewanna's success today. Chief Sayers' post-secondary education and, more importantly, historical understandings of Batchewanna and its people have been instrumental to the First Nations' success. Chief Sayers and the Batchewanna First Nations had led the charge in demanding Indigenous peoples' fair share of resource revenues. Resource developers are eager to work with the community in a wide array of resource extraction initiatives, including data collection through to renewable energy projects. Secondly, we have Mike Restool, who is the chair of the Robertson-Huron Treaty Trust. Mike Restool is a citizen of Nipissing First Nation in Ontario, Canada. His Ojibwe name is Washuk Muskrat. He is Nipissing Ojibwe of the Anishinaabe Nation. His Doden, his clan, is the Turtle. Mike's formal education was as a journeyman railway mechanic, and he studied labor management relations with the Canadian Labour Congress. He's also studied political science and law and justice at Laurentian University in Sudbury, Ontario. Mike's early career was in the railway and telecommunications industry, where he worked as a journeyman and as an official with the railway in his later career. He also worked with the Anishinaabe Nation, concentrating in the negotiations of education and governance. Mike's volunteer interests include serving on the board of directors at the local Indigenous Friendship Centre and as a councillor for 17 years in Nipissing First Nations Council. Today, he continues to serve the Indigenous community as the lead plaintiff in a treaty legal action against Canada and Ontario that is making its way through Ontario's court system. And thirdly, we have Chris Albanati. Chris Albanati is the primary junior lawyer on the Restool legal team and has been present in court throughout all stages of the Restool litigation, including the recent hearings before the Ontario Court of Appeal. Chris received his Juris Doctor from Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops, BC, and articled with the Appeals Division of the Legal Services Society of BC. He is called to the bar of BC and Ontario and joined Nawagabao Corbiere as an associate. In 2017, Chris successfully defended his LLM thesis titled Indigenous Blockades and the Power to Speak the Law from Settler Colonialism to Indigenous Resurgence at Osgoode Law School and began working on a PhD dissertation on the assertion and performance of Indigenous laws and jurisdiction in the context of Indigenous land defenders. Chris practices solely in the area of Aboriginal law and primarily in treaty, Aboriginal title and rights litigation, where he advocates exclusively for First Nations clients. He has appeared at all levels of the court, including the Supreme Court of Canada, where he was co-counsel for the Indigenous Bar Association. So as I said, I'm thrilled to be welcoming these three esteemed people to speak with us today and share information about the Restool decision. I'd like to begin just by asking, inviting our three panelists to introduce themselves and explain their connection to the Restool decision. Why don't we go ahead with you, Chief Sayers?
Bonjour, Kenewea, I'm Chief Teen Sayers, and my name is, he stands and walks tall and flies with tilted wing. And I'm from the Crane clan. More particularly, I'm Blue Heron. And that's really significant in my neck of the woods. this is where we understand creation has evolved from. And at one point in our history, not long after we were lowered here, it was the crane that worked with us and helped us in choosing an area on behalf of the Creator that we would look after. And that area is the eastern shore of Lake Superior at the heart of Turtle Island, the heart of the Great Lakes. And we've had responsibility at the center of that to be able to make sure that that area around our Mother Earth's heart is clean and looked after properly. And with that came a lot of instructions on how that was supposed to happen. So part of that instruction was never, well, all of that instruction was never ceded, was never succumbed, was never a part of any surrender within the agreements that we made to the new people that arrived on our lands. We always maintained those promises to the Creator and all of creation. So throughout this land, we've not been shy about not only asserting, but reclaiming a lot of those inherent jurisdictions that we inherited from the Creator. And that has come to light in many ways, including being listed along with Mike as one of the plaintiffs with regards to the annuities. We've also challenged the illegal assertion of the Ontario government to manage forestry. We've also challenged the illegal assertion of jurisdiction that was exercised by the Ontario government around fisheries. And on the most part, we've been successful. Even the assertion of lands that were stolen from us, a huge provincial park about 60 miles long, about 10 miles inland, that was stolen from us in the 1940s. And that one is on its transition back to us under Indigenous title, not under the fake title that the Crown asserts. And in particular, we were really careful. We are the 15th band, the 15th group of people that signed off on the Robinson-Huron Treaty. And we were 15th because we almost didn't sign it. We were really uncomfortable with the confines of the treaty. We had initially understood that it was only about copper, and that's still our premise today. And we ended up being number 15. We almost didn't sign it. We were not going to compromise our inheritance, our inherent jurisdictions, and that's still alive and well. Unfortunately, for a period of time through history, it was illegal for us to talk this way. I probably would have been arrested for saying these things today, just up till 1950 or so. So since 1950, now that it's legal for us to hire a lawyer, now that it's legal for us to challenge the Crown, now that it's legal for us to leave the community, now that it's legal for us to get educated, we're starting to open up and say, wow, what a gift we've been given by our historic leadership, our elders, our ancestors that somehow incorporated such beautiful inherent jurisdictions into what we see now as the Robinson-Huron Treaty. We do have concerns with the written document that you see, because we didn't even speak English. We didn't even write, but somehow we've been able to maintain those inherent expectations throughout history. And even today, when you interpret the treaty from our lens, which is of legal force, you'll find that we are still probably the most powerful nation in Canada as far as our reserved inherent jurisdictions. And the key thing with the Robinson-Huron Treaty, if you really read it carefully or understand it carefully, is that if the treaty fails, there was never an absolute surrender of our jurisdiction. If this treaty fails, the land doesn't revert to the Crown, the land reverts back to us, and that scares the crap out of the Crown. And you'll notice there's absolute surrenders afterwards in a number of treaties, but this one is the most powerful treaty that reserved so many jurisdictions for the Indigenous people in this area. And all we have to do is say, treaty's done, we're negating the treaty, and guess what? It all reverts back to us. So unfortunately, we have to go to these great extents to see the true spirit and intent of the implementation expectations we have. And unfortunately, we had to go into the visitors court, which is scary for us because we never gave jurisdiction to the visitors to operate a justice system, to operate a policing system, to operate a legal system. Those were all illegal assertions of the parliamentary supremacy, I call it, that Canada assumed, which is illegal based on, I feel like taking this from the Indians today, so I'm going to do it. And I dare them to try and stop me, and I'll kill them if they stop me. So we went through a lot of years of that kind of mentality. So where we are today is a pretty wonderful, beautiful place, and we can assert, and we don't have to be afraid of being arrested and thrown in jail for 6 months for this or 6 months for that. Like my dad, who just passed away, he would have been 100 this year. And he said all the way throughout his being young, he had heard from, he was experiencing it. Well, no matter what happened in the city, they'd pick them up, 6 months in jail, 6 months in jail. It was always, if you're hunting, you got caught hunting, 6 months in jail. You got caught fishing, 6 months in jail. Never a trial, never processes. If there was a murder, oh, the Indians did it. It was just, so now it's not like that. We've moved a little ways, not where we want to be, but we got a long ways to go yet. Unfortunately, the annuities, like who else around this world pays their landlord $4 a year? We're the landlord. Why is not the Crown paying their rent they promised to us? Why do we have to take them to court? That's ridiculous. And they fight us right to the end. Like, and I'm assuming that they're going to keep fighting us. But when I talk to Ontario citizens, Canadian citizens, they say, really? They didn't pay the rent. I came to Canada respecting and understanding this beautiful relationship that Canada has with Indigenous people, and to find that they're crapping on Indigenous people and stealing from them and killing them and murdering them and taking away their freedoms and putting them on these concentration camps they call reserves, and taking their kids on them and putting them in residential schools, killing their kids, hiding them, all illegal stuff. Canadians don't want that. That's what I'm hearing. They're telling the governments of Ontario and Canada, and there's a petition that's going to be served tomorrow, like, pay the rent, stop these appeals, stop fighting the Indians. Like, they're beautiful people. We need their insight. We need their wisdom for how we're going to look after the earth. I hope the Canadians will hear some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, so that we can have a rightful relationship based on how we anticipated that through the prophecies that were shared with us historically. We will get into a better place. It is coming. Come hell or high water, we will get there. And I'm going to be a part of that. And I'm going to push. And I'm going to be taking advantage of these opportunities to share with Canadians the true history, the reality of who we are. Not his story, somebody else's story that's endorsed by the Crown, but our story. So thank you for this opportunity to be able to share today, and thank you for an opportunity to provide a little segue. And I'm honored to sit here with this elder, Mike, and also our council here with Chris. It's really wonderful to be in this company, along with all the people that are joining us online. So miigwech.
Miigwech, thank you for that opening statement, giving a broad overview of so much is related to this decision. I wonder if I can invite you, Chris, to introduce yourself and to explain your connection with the case. But I think that we could just also move directly into learning about the Restall decision, about the litigation. It'd be helpful if we could ask you to situate ourselves in the litigation, tell us about the issues that are being litigated in the Restall, Robertson, Superior and Huron treaty case, and perhaps a little bit about the procedure connected to that case. Thanks, Chris.
Sure, miigwech Danelia. Mabitsia Kao to Anse, Chris Albanati. I'm speaking to you here from the Lekwungen speaking peoples, the territory of the Esquimalt and Songhees Nation here in Victoria, so-called British Columbia. Visiting here for a couple weeks to get my head fully immersed in this case again as we prepare for stage 3, which I'll talk about and outline for you. So of course, the Robertson-Huron Treaty, the Restall litigation, as it's being referred to, is about interpreting the proper interpretation of that Robertson-Huron Treaty. It was trifurcated, as you sort of mentioned, into 3 stages. So the first stage was about treaty interpretation. So how do we interpret the treaty itself, and in particular, a provision in the treaty in the written text of the treaty, if you will. That's called the augmentation clause. And I won't sort of go into it because of time, but the augmentation clause essentially, says that as the productivity of the territory is increased, the annuity that is paid every year will also be increased. And then it has this sort of part of it that says, or such further sum as Her Majesty may be graciously pleased to order. But stage one was really about that. And in order to interpret a treaty under Canadian law, in the Canadian courts, it requires a search, if you will, for common intention. It's the legal terminology for it. And so a common intention implies that there are two perspectives, two mutual perspectives. Where did they meet? Where are they? What common ground is there between, on the one hand, the Anishinaabe Nation and the British Crown at the time of the treaty. And so it involves a lot of evidence about those two perspectives to try to understand what was possible in terms of a common intention. And so as Guy Sayers was saying in his overview, there is his story, or the Crown's story, their version of the events that took place, their version of their understanding of the treaty, and that's clearly captured in the written text of the treaty. But the Anishinaabe also have their own understanding of the treaty, their own history that they've kept sacred, obviously, and kept, throughout the 170 years since the time of the treaty. They've managed to ensure that it's remained in place and preserved, so that history, the Anishinaabe understanding and history of the treaty, is not washed away or flooded by the rising tide of colonialism. And so in our opening statements, both at trial and in the Ontario Court of Appeal, we talked about a sacred story, a sacred Anishinaabe story, Ansukanag, about creation, about flood, and about the story of muskrat, or Wajushk, which is the name, as you mentioned, of Mike Stool, who's one of our lead named plaintiffs. And the story of Wajushk is about resurgence. It's about ensuring that those things that get flooded out, you can reclaim them and resurge, and there's a resurgence there. And so those things are brought up to make the earth anew and to restore them. And so that's what we're dealing with in stage one, is bringing all of these things to light, bringing the Anishinaabe worldview, bringing Anishinaabe laws, governance, language to bear and before a court, so that they can properly